What's going on, everybody? Welcome back again to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. Well, today's video, I want to give you a list of 10 hidden gem mind-melting movies. And this isn't going to be a ranking, it's just simply a list of 10 recommendations of, like I said, hidden gems. These are lesser known, lesser talked about, underrated type movies that are going to mess with your mind. There's going to be the typical horror and thriller stuff, but I'm also going to get into a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of mystery. So without further ado, buckle up, here we go. So first up on the list is Coherence, and this is actually available to stream right now as of the recording of this video on Amazon Prime. And Coherence is really fun. This is a very low budget, small scale movie, but it is just exploding with ideas. It tells the story of 8 friends who gather at this house, and there's kind of this special event that's happening. A comet is passing overhead. Suddenly, all the power goes out, and they start experiencing some crazy events. And that's all I'll say about it. And as I said, this is a really low budget one. It was made for about $50,000, all filmed in one location, and it was filmed over the course of 5 days. A lot of the dialogue was improvised, and in fact, the actors, they would receive like paragraphs each day with kind of their characters' goals for the day, so that a lot of the kind of conversation and reactions would just feel more raw and natural. But this movie is a perfect testament to you not having to need millions and millions of dollars with all sorts of crazy, outrageous special effects to make a good movie. You just need a really good idea and a good story, and Coherence definitely executes it. It is definitely more in a sci-fi mystery type realm, but man, this thing is really solid. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend it. Next up on the list is Time Crimes, and this is a Spanish production. It was directed by Nacho Vigalondo, and this one too is a more of a sci-fi mystery, but this one definitely has some horror elements mixed into it. And this tells the story of a guy who uncovers a time machine, and he travels back in time nearly an hour. And trying to find himself will be the first in a series of disasters of unforeseeable consequences. The time travel aspect in this one is really cool. I typically really enjoy when sci-fi type movies mess around with the timeline and introduce some sort of time machine. And it just really obviously opens up a lot of opportunities for a lot of unexpected twists and turns, and Time Crimes is definitely filled with them. So I highly recommend this one. Check it out. Next up on the list is Triangle, and you can actually stream this right now for free on Freevee. And this is another sort of sci-fi mystery type thriller. And this one tells the story of this woman named Jess who goes out with a group of friends on this yacht trip. Something ends up happens, and they end up having to board this big ocean liner that appears to be completely deserted. And then they figure out that they're not alone, and somebody is hunting them down one by one. And this is just another real trippy one, and it will keep you guessing, filled with all sorts of unpredictable twists and turns. Just like a lot of these, I could probably say that for every single one of these, but that's what makes it mind-melting, right? And this is just another one that has a really solid concept and story that they execute quite well. So check out Triangle. Next up on the list is Predestination, and this is directed by the Spierig brothers. Features 2 solid performances, one from Ethan Hawke, the other from Sarah Snook. And this one tells the story of an agent who is on his final assignment pursuing a criminal that has eluded him throughout time. His pursuit turns into a unique, surprising, and unpredictable exploration of love, fate, identity, and time travel. And Predestination is largely sci-fi, but also part action, part thriller as well. And this is truly one of the most mind-bending, unpredictable movies I've ever seen. The few that I've given you before this are definitely unpredictable, filled with twists and turns, but I think this thing takes the cake. This is one that is maybe almost certainly going to require a couple watches to fully grasp everything going on. It is an absolute trip. And if you haven't watched it, I cannot stress it enough. You gotta check this thing out because Predestination is pretty fantastic. Next up on the list is Paprika. This one's a little bit different. This is a Japanese anime directed by the late great Satoshi Kon, who you may know from his film Perfect Blue, which is another film that could probably be on this list. However, I went with Paprika. And this is another bit of a sci-fi, kind of a fantasy, mystery thriller. There's just a whole lot going on in this one. The tagline for this one is, "This is your brain on anime." And let me tell you, this movie is absolutely wild. And it tells the story of these scientists who figure out how to record people's dreams. And this dream terrorist shows up and is able to invade people's dreams and start attacking their psyches. Kind of sounds a little bit like Inception, because believe it or not, Inception actually got a little bit of inspiration from this movie. But this movie is just visually gorgeous. I mean, just the dreamscapes take the creativity of this thing completely off the charts. Just the imagery and the colors is just fantastic. You can stream it right now on the Criterion channel. So if you haven't seen Paprika, check it out. Next up on the list, and here we're kind of moving out of the sci-fi into more of the darker horror thriller movies. But next up is Kill List. And this was directed by British director Ben Wheatley. And Kill List tells the story of this hitman who decides to take one final assignment with the promise of a big payoff for 3 killings. What starts off as an easy task soon unravels, sending the killer into the heart of darkness. And Kill List is a pretty interesting experience. It kind of starts off as a bit of a crime drama and then kind of evolves into a bit of an action thriller and then finally evolves again towards the end into just all-out horror. It's actually been quite a few years since I've seen this thing, but it has not left me. The ending of this is one of the most disturbed and messed up endings I have ever seen. It is pretty unforgettable, so if you're in the mood for something cheery, give Kill List a try, but man, it is pretty solid. All right, next up on the list is Ghost Stories, and you can stream this right now on AMC Plus, and I actually did a pretty full in-depth review of this already, but anything to just get more attention to this thing. I absolutely love Ghost Stories. It tells the story of this paranormal, kind of skeptical investigator who is investigating these 3 claims of paranormal activities, these 3 ghost stories. And this one's cool because you get a bit of a sort of an anthology type vibe to it as you get 3 separate stories that he investigates. Ultimately, everything culminates into this one big kind of massive reveal. There's a lot of kind of stuff underneath the surface here, just interesting themes, kind of faith and doubt and skepticism versus belief and things like that that just kind of make this thing really interesting. There's just a lot of details and things that you can pick up on multiple viewings, and so it really just rewards rewatchability and stuff like that. And so I can't recommend this thing enough. Like I said, if you want more in-depth thoughts, definitely check out my review. I'll be sure to put a link in the description, but man, Ghost Stories is pretty phenomenal, so if you haven't, obviously check it out. Next up on the list is Possum, and this one is more of a dramatic horror mystery, and this one tells the story of this children's puppeteer who is forced to confront his wicked stepfather and the secrets that have tortured him his entire life. And I'll just say, this thing is just pure nightmare fuel. The atmosphere in this one is just gnarly. And the puppet that this guy carries around with him is absolutely horrifying. And if you're kind of like myself and spiders freak you out a little bit, this thing is really going to get under your skin. The atmosphere and the vibe is just creepy and eerie and really unsettling. Just some of the best atmosphere I've seen in a horror movie in the last few years. It's just really stuck with me, and just the visuals are really solid. Also, too, the lead performance by Sean Harris is really solid as well. So if you haven't seen Possum, you can stream it right now in a handful of different places. It's on Tubi, Freevee, and I think Shudder. So check out Possum. It's pretty good. All right, next up is The Invitation, and this is not the recent one from this year. This is the one from 2015, directed by Karyn Kusama, starring Logan Marshall Green and John Carroll Lynch. This is also a dramatic horror mystery. It tells the story of this man and his girlfriend who accept an invitation to a dinner party hosted by his ex-wife, and once there, things slowly become clear that his ex-wife and her new friends have a mysterious and terrifying agenda. And this thing is just a really solid example of a slow burn as things just kind of slowly progress until you get to the end and the pot boils over and all hell breaks loose. But man, this is just such a great ride to go on. I mentioned John Carroll Lynch is in this movie. And he is one of those guys that every time he shows up, man, he just crushes it. He's got a monologue in this movie that is just horrifying and really uncomfortable, but man, he just sells the crap out of his performance. That guy is kind of one of the most underrated actors, but every time he shows up, man, he is just really solid. But this is just a really solid one. Like I said, I love slow burn. I just kind of love that slow building suspense until just, you know, all hell breaks loose kind of thing. And this is just a great example of that. The Invitation is also available on streaming. You can watch it on Freevee, on Tubi, on Shudder as well. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. All right, so that takes us to the 10th and final hidden gem mind melter movie, and that is Pi. And this was directed by Darren Aronofsky, probably the most well-known director on this list. And most of the time when people talk about his movies, at least sort of the more psychological, trippy ones, you're going to talk about Mother or Black Swan. But Pi is his feature film debut. This came out in 1998. Man, this thing is crazy. And this one tells the story of this guy named Max, who is this brilliant genius mathematician, and he's been working on unlocking and sort of breaking this mathematical code to discover secrets to the stock market. And this thing was filmed in just this really gnarly looking high contrast black and white that just looks great. And this thing's got all sorts of stuff going for it. It's got just a very sort of paranoid vibe, conspiracy theory vibes. It even gets into like Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah as these groups start coming after him to try to figure out what he's up to. And man, this thing is just an absolute trip of a movie. Like with all these, I highly recommend it, but I'm sure there's probably a good chance you've seen Mother and Black Swan. But if you haven't seen Pi, you got to watch it. It is really solid. I think it's on par with the best of Darren Aronofsky's work, so check it out. Well, that concludes this list. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit me up down below, though. Let me know if you got any recommendations, some hidden gems in this sort of subgenre. I always am looking for movies that will mess with my mind. And also, if you like this video and like content like this, please consider hitting that subscribe button. This is what I do on The Haunted Beard, horror and thriller movie content coming at you. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.